everyone, and welcome to our newscast. I'm Ariana Morello, and I will be your news anchor today. Today, we will be discussing the Crusades, and we will specifically be discussing the Third Crusade. We will learn about two major events of the Third Crusade, we will hear two eyewitness accounts of the Third Crusade, and finally, we will get a summary of the Third Crusade. First, let's introduce the other people at the studio today.
Hi everyone, I'm Anand and I'm the field reporter and I'll be discussing two major events of the Third Crusade.
Hi everyone, I'm Isa and I'm also the field reporter and I'll be summarizing the Third Crusade.
Thanks guys, I can't wait to hear from our special guests who will be giving us two eyewitness reports later. But before we can get into the Third Crusade, let's discuss exactly what the Crusades were in general for the viewers who might not know. The Crusades were a series of religious wars. They took place during the medieval period and were often directed by the Latin Church. The Crusades occurred between 1096 and 1291. The Crusades were bloody, violent, and often ruthless conflicts that propelled the status of European Christians and made them major players in the fight for the land in the Middle East. The most influential of the Crusades were intended to recover important areas like Jerusalem and its surrounding areas. But some of the Crusades were for other reasons. Not all of the Crusades were successful, but regardless, they were an extremely important turning point in the history of the church.
The first major event of the Third Crusade that we will be discussing is the Battle of Jaffa. The Battle of Jaffa took place on August 5th, 1192, and was the final battle of the Third Crusade. This battle led directly to a peace deal between England's King Richard and the Lionheart and Saladin, a Muslim leader. The peace deal restricted the Christian presence in the Holy Land to a thin strip of the coast, but ensured its survival in the Holy Land for another century. King Richard was planning to return in late July when Saladin attacked Jaffa, capturing the town while the citadel remained unclaimed. Saladin attacked King Richard's camp on the outskirts of Jaffa as the sun was rising. In preparation for the attack, Richard assigned his infantry and 63 knights to the front lines and put his crossbowmen in the back and ordered them to aim at enemy horses. Halfway through the afternoon, Saladin launched another attack to cover up the cavalry sneaking around Richard's camp to attack Jaffa. This failed because Richard saw the attack coming.
The second major event of the Third Crusade that we will be reviewing happened after the news of Jerusalem falling reached Europe, sending Pope Urban III into shock, and he later passed away due to the news. Gregory VIII, his successor, issued a crusade bill calling for penitence and fasting. A recovery had to be made before a new crusade could be issued. And 2 weeks later, Conrad of Montferrat landed in Tyre along with a small Italian fleet and a group of followers. He established his position and successfully fought off an attack by Saladin. Saladin then released King Guy at the end of 1188, and Conrad daringly refused to submit to him.
King Guy, in a brave attempt to reestablish his authority, gathered the few followers he had left and attacked Acre, catching Saladin by surprise and succeeding in besieging Acre. By the winter of 1190, the Crusaders had begun suffering due to disease and famine, while Saladin was unsuccessful in relieving the city. King Guy's wife, Sybil, was one of the people that fell victim to the disease and his sole claim to the throne. The majority of the older barons that had been supporting him thus far shifted their support to Conrad, resulting in Sybil, Isabel's sister, having her marriage to Humphrey of Torun annulled and then remarried to Conrad. William II of Sicily was the first to respond to the papal appeal, along with Danish, English, and Flemish ships. Gregory VIII parted with the largest crusade army assembled thus far and crossed Hungary and went into Byzantine territory. Frederick then captured the city of Adrianople and only returned it once Isaac agreed to move the Germans across Hellespont and into Turkey. On June 10th, he later died attempting to swim in a stream. His death resulted in the German army losing morale, while the Muslims and Saladin viewed his death as an act of God. The Third Crusade was a failure since its main objective was to retake Jerusalem.
Today I will be speaking with the high-ranking member of Saladin's court, Baha-ad-Din ibn Sadid. What happened at the massacre at Ayodhya?
I was there along with the majority of the Sassanian army where 2,700 of my comrades were killed. It was a very traumatic experience for me.
He is best known for his biography where he conducted a personal observation of Saladin in the eyes of the way the Muslims viewed Saladin. How was this for you?
I reflected on the Sultan's execution of the treaty and how he acted perfidiously as regards to the Muslim prisoners. The king broke his promise to them and had them massacred. I criticized the Franks, or Christians, and I was somewhat hostile in my philosophical attitudes towards them. I also clearly defined the Franks as being enemies of God and Muslims, and explained how the Franks' greatest flaws was their untrustworthiness. Now, I will be introducing the Andalusi Muslim secretary to the Almohad governor of Granada, Ibn Jubayr.
I wrote an eyewitness testimony in times of military hostils as seen between Muslims and Christians. I wrote glowingly on behalf of Saladin and was hostile towards Westerners or those that specifically initiated the Frankish invasions.
He claims that the soldiers engage themselves in their war while the people are at peace. It can be noted that Jubair made an important observation in his reflections of war between Muslims and Crusaders. Despite the war that existed between the two realms, merchants and commerce continued to move freely if things remained stable and normal.
So in conclusion, the Crusade, which is also known as the King's Crusade because it was led by King Richard I of England, was an attempt by European leaders to conquer the Holy Land from Saladin. There was no outright winner of the Third Crusade, and much depends on how we measure success. For example, whether we examine the enterprise's immediate outcomes in relation to the goals laid out in Aurita Tremendi, another material for the expedition's preaching, whether the recovery of Jerusalem and the true cross are considered the sole objectives, with all other gains sitting outside the official crusade. Whether we compare the extent of the Muslims and Christians' territorial holdings in the Latin East before and after the crusade, or whether the long-term consequences of events like the conquest of Cyprus, recapture of Acre are prioritized.